It started innocently enough, a company dinner. Samantha, my wife of 10 years, insisted I come along, claiming it was a great networking opportunity. Besides, she teased, adjusting the neckline of her emerald dress, everyone's bringing their spouses. You wouldn't want me to look like a loner, would you? I laughed, shaking my head. Can't have that, can we? We arrived at the upscale downtown hotel, its grandeur accentuated by sparkling chandeliers and the hum of corporate small talk. Samantha was radiant, gliding through the crowd with her trademark charm. She introduced me to colleagues and supervisors, and though the pleasantries flowed smoothly, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It began with the dress. Samantha's emerald green gown hugged her figure in a way that seemed calculated, a departure from her usual more reserved attire. She had spent an unusually long time picking it out, second-guessing herself in front of the mirror. I'd chalked it up to nerves then, but now, watching her laugh a little too loudly and touch people's arms a little too much, I began to wonder. As the evening wore on, I found myself on the periphery of her orbit. She darted from conversation to conversation, her glass of champagne perpetually half full. I hung back by the bar, nursing a whiskey and observing. I wasn't jealous. Our relationship had always been built on trust, but something gnawed at me, subtle yet insistent, like a faint smell of smoke in a room where no fire was visible. It wasn't until dinner that the tension began to solidify into something tangible. We were seated at a long table, surrounded by her colleagues. Samantha was between me and her coworker, Nathan, a sleek, confident man I recognized from her stories about the office. I watched as she leaned toward him, her laughter bright and melodic, her hand brushing his arm as she made a point. He responded in kind, his smile easy, his tone casual but intimate in a way that set my teeth on edge. At one point, Nathan poured her another glass of wine without asking, his fingers lingering on the bottle as she smiled up at him. She didn't flinch or pull away. Instead, she clinked her glass to his with a conspiratorial smirk. Must be a great team, I commented lightly, masking my growing unease. Samantha glanced at me, her expression unreadable. Nathan's been instrumental in our latest project, she said. Couldn't have done it without him. Nathan raised his glass. Oh, please. Sam's the real genius. I'm just along for the ride. The conversation moved on, but my mind stayed stuck on that exchange. I tried to brush it off. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe my mind was playing tricks on me. But then Samantha's phone, sitting face up on the table, lit up with a notification. Nathan glanced at it, his smile flickering for a moment. Samantha saw it too, and she quickly flipped the phone over, her cheeks coloring faintly. Work never stops, huh? I quipped, trying to keep my voice light. Just a client, she said too quickly, reaching for her glass. Later, during the CEO's speech, Samantha excused herself, claiming she needed to freshen up. I'll be back in a few, she whispered, brushing my arm as she rose. Minutes ticked by. 10, then 15. When she didn't return, I decided to check on her. Maybe she was stuck in line for the restroom, or perhaps she'd been cornered by a colleague. I wove my way through the crowd, my pulse quickening with each step. The bathrooms were empty. The bar was crowded, but Samantha wasn't there either. Finally, as I approached a side hallway, I heard muffled voices. Curious, I followed the sound, my steps cautious. Behind a half-open door marked storage, I froze. Samantha's unmistakable laugh echoed, soft and intimate. My stomach churned as I peeked through the gap. There she was, standing with Nathan. He was too close, his hand resting lightly on her waist. Her head tilted back as she laughed at something he whispered in her ear. I stepped back, my heart pounding. For a moment, I felt paralyzed. Should I confront them? Walk away? Scream? But before I could decide, Nathan leaned in closer, his lips brushing her cheek. Samantha didn't pull away. In that instant, the faint smoke I'd sensed all evening erupted into a full-blown blaze. Something was wrong, terribly, undeniably wrong. I stood in the hallway, my fists clenched at my sides, fighting the impulse to storm in and demand answers. Instead, I turned and walked briskly away, my thoughts racing. The image of Samantha and Nathan burned in my mind. Her laugh, his hand, their closeness. It felt like betrayal, even if nothing explicit had happened. I returned to the ballroom and sat back down at our table, my drink untouched. The noise of the crowd washed over me, but I felt utterly disconnected. When Samantha finally returned, her hair slightly mussed and her cheeks flushed, she offered me a radiant smile as if nothing had happened. Sorry, got caught up in a chat with Nathan about the project. Did I miss anything good? Her tone was light, but I could see the tightness in her shoulders, the forced ease in her expression. I swallowed my growing doubts, forcing a smile. No, just the usual boring speeches. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Samantha was her usual lively self, charming everyone at the table. But I couldn't stop scrutinizing every glance she exchanged with Nathan, every smile that seemed just a little too private. On the drive home, silence filled the car. Samantha hummed along to the radio, seemingly oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I couldn't bring myself to bring it up, not yet. I needed to know for sure before accusing her of something that could unravel everything. That night, as she drifted off to sleep beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts churning. Was I overreacting? Had I misinterpreted what I saw? But the knot in my stomach wouldn't let me rest. The next day, I decided to dig a little deeper. Samantha's phone was on the kitchen counter as she showered. The screen lit up with a notification. My gut twisted as I glanced at the message preview. Nathan, last night was great. Let's talk more soon. I picked up the phone, my heart hammering. I knew it was wrong, but I needed answers. The thread between Samantha and Nathan was shorter than I expected. Messages had been deleted, their conversations curated to appear innocent. The sense of betrayal deepened. If there was nothing to hide, why erase messages? That evening, I casually asked about her day. Samantha was warm and cheerful, recounting office gossip and laughing about a client's ridiculous request. There wasn't a hint of guilt in her demeanor. Anything new with Nathan? I asked, testing the waters. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. So brief, I might have missed it if I weren't watching so closely. Not really, she said, too quickly. Just the usual work stuff. Why? No reason, I replied, my voice steady. But now I was certain. Something was going on. Over the next week, Samantha's behavior grew more erratic. She started working late more frequently, her explanations vague. When she was home, she seemed distracted, always checking her phone but never letting me see the screen. The breaking point came when she announced she'd be attending an out-of-town seminar with Nathan. It's mandatory, she said, avoiding my eyes as she packed. And it'll just be a couple of days. You know how these things are. I nodded, playing along. But inside, I was seething. My mind spun with possibilities, each one more damning than the last. The night before she left, as she prepared for bed, I decided it was time to act. I'll miss you, I said, watching her carefully. She smiled, leaning in to kiss me. I'll miss you too. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But the walls she had built around her truth were too high for her words to scale. After she fell asleep, I went to work. I'd installed a tracking app on her phone earlier that week, a precaution I never thought I'd need in my marriage. Now, as she packed for her seminar, I knew I'd finally get the answers I was looking for. I spent the next day watching her location ping across the city as she made her way to the hotel where the seminar was supposedly happening. But as the hours passed, her movements didn't add up. The seminar location was far from the places she visited, a cafe, then a park, then a high-end restaurant. Finally, as night fell, her phone's location settled at an address I didn't recognize. My heart pounded as I searched it online. It was a boutique hotel, far from the conference center she'd mentioned. This wasn't a seminar. I felt the betrayal solidify, sharp and cold in my chest. But I didn't call or text her. Instead, I planned my next move. It was time to confront the truth, no matter how devastating it might be. The next morning, the first rays of sunlight did nothing to warm the cold determination that had settled over me. Samantha's deceit was no longer a theory. It was a fact. I couldn't let it fester any longer. Her phone's tracking app told me she was still at the boutique hotel. She hadn't returned to the seminar venue at all. I brewed coffee, my mind running through possible confrontations. Should I call her? Wait until she came home? No, this couldn't wait. By mid-morning, I was in my car, the hotel's address entered into the GPS. The drive was a blur of anger and adrenaline. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, my thoughts bouncing between disbelief and rage. When I arrived, the hotel's facade glinted in the sunlight, mocking me with its air of elegance. I parked and made my way inside, my heart pounding. "Good morning, sir." The receptionist greeted me with a practiced smile. I forced a polite nod, my stomach churning. "I'm meeting my wife, Samantha. She's staying here." The receptionist's expression faltered. "I can't provide room information without a guest's permission." "I understand," I said, my tone smooth. "She asked me to bring something she forgot. She's in room 312. The receptionist hesitated, then nodded. "You can leave it with me, or—" "She wanted me to hand it to her directly," I said, keeping my voice casual. After a moment, she handed me a key card. "If you need assistance, just let us know." "Thank you," I murmured, turning toward the elevator. Inside, I felt like I was suffocating. My pulse thudded in my ears as I rode up to the third floor. The number 312 loomed like a curse. I approached the door, staring at it as if it might swallow me whole. With trembling hands, I slid the keycard into the lock. The soft click felt deafening in the silence. I pushed the door open slowly, stepping inside. The room was pristine, save for a suitcase in the corner and two half-empty glasses of champagne on the nightstand. The air was heavy with the scent of Samantha's perfume, a smell I had loved and now loathed. I heard voices from the adjoining bathroom. Samantha's unmistakable laugh mingled with a deeper, male voice. "Nathan." The betrayal stabbed through me, sharp and final. My vision blurred as I turned toward the sound, my footsteps echoing on the plush carpet. "Samantha," I called, my voice steady but cold. The laughter stopped abruptly. A moment later, the bathroom door opened, and Samantha stepped out, wearing nothing but a hotel robe. Her eyes widened when she saw me, her face draining of color. "Ethan," she stammered, clutching the robe tighter. "What are you doing here?" Nathan appeared behind her, his shirt half-buttoned, his smirk fading as he took in the scene. "What am I doing here?" I repeated, my voice rising. "What the hell are you doing here, Samantha? At a boutique hotel with him?" She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Nathan, ever the charmer, stepped forward, his hands raised in a mock gesture of surrender. "Look, man," he began. "This isn't what it looks like." "Don't you dare," I snarled, cutting him off. I turned my attention back to Samantha, my fury boiling over. "How long, Samantha? How long has this been going on?" Her lips trembled, her eyes brimming with tears. "Ethan, please, let's go somewhere private and talk." "Private?" I snapped. "You think you deserve privacy after this? After sneaking around, lying to me for God knows how long?" Nathan cleared his throat. "Maybe I should." "You should shut the hell up," I barked, my glare pinning him in place. Samantha's tears spilled over as she stepped closer, reaching for me. "Ethan, I'm so sorry." I stepped back, avoiding her touch. "Don't," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "You don't get to cry, Samantha. You don't get to apologize." "Not now." Her sobs filled the room as Nathan hovered awkwardly, clearly out of his depth. I turned to him, my voice laced with venom. "Enjoy it while it lasts, Nathan. You think you've won? Let me tell you, this won't end well for you. Or her." Without waiting for a response, I turned on my heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind me. My heart pounded as I reached the lobby, ignoring the curious stares of staff and guests. In the car, I gripped the steering wheel, my breath ragged. The weight of Samantha's betrayal threatened to crush me, but I refused to let it. She and Nathan had no idea what was coming. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I spent the rest of the day oscillating between fury and cold calculation. Samantha's betrayal was a gaping wound, but it also lit a fire in me, a need to reclaim my dignity, to turn her smug deceit against her. I knew I couldn't act out of blind anger. Samantha and Nathan might have won this round, but the game wasn't over. I needed to be smart, strategic. By the time night fell, I had a plan. A way to expose their betrayal while keeping my composure intact. The first step was assembling evidence. Samantha had underestimated me, thinking she could erase her tracks. But technology had a way of preserving secrets. Using the tracking app and the limited texts I'd glimpsed on her phone, I pieced together a timeline of her meetings with Nathan. Late nights, seminars, and convenient client dinners all aligned too neatly with her affair. Then there was the room keycard still in my pocket. My return to the boutique hotel wasn't just for confrontation. It was for collection. Before I'd left, I'd discreetly taken photos of the room, the champagne glasses, the rumpled bed, and the suitcase with Nathan's initials embossed on the tag. Armed with this, I knew the next phase of my plan needed a witness. I called the only person who could help me without hesitation. Daniel, my oldest friend and the type of person who thrived in chaos. When I laid out the situation, he didn't flinch. So you want me to what? Be a second pair of eyes while you burn her world to the ground? Daniel's voice was tinged with amusement, but I could hear the outrage beneath it. Something like that, I admitted. I'm going to give her the chance to tell the truth, and if she doesn't, I'll make sure she has no room left to spin her lies. We agreed to meet the next evening at my house. I hadn't told Samantha I'd be home, and I knew she'd try to waltz in with her usual casual facade, expecting me to remain oblivious. But nothing could have prepared me for what unfolded. The following night, Daniel arrived with his usual dramatic flair, a pizza box in one hand and a six-pack in the other. If we're going to stage a reckoning, we might as well do it on a full stomach, he joked. I managed a weak smile, grateful for his levity. We didn't have to wait long. Around 9 p.m., Samantha's car pulled into the driveway. I watched from the window as she stepped out, her demeanor calm, even cheerful. She was carrying a tote bag, her hair and makeup fresh, as though she were returning from a productive day at the seminar. Showtime, Daniel muttered. Leaning back on the couch, his arms crossed. I opened the door just as Samantha reached for her keys. She blinked, startled, but quickly recovered. Ethan, you're home early. I thought I'd surprise you, I said, my voice cool. She stepped inside, her smile faltering when she saw Daniel. Oh, hi, Daniel. Hey, Sam, he said, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. Samantha hesitated, clearly thrown by his presence. What's going on? I gestured for her to sit. We need to talk. Her eyes flicked nervously between us, but she complied, settling onto the couch. I sat across from her, Daniel remaining as a silent observer in the corner. I went to your seminar yesterday, I began, watching her closely. Samantha's face paled. You what? I wanted to surprise you, I said. But imagine my surprise when I found you at a boutique hotel with Nathan. Her mouth opened, then closed. She shifted uncomfortably, her hands gripping her tote bag. Ethan, I can explain. Then explain, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. She hesitated, her eyes darting to Daniel, then back to me. Nathan and we've been working closely on this project. Sometimes, we go over details outside the office. But it's purely professional. Professional? I interrupted, laughing bitterly. I pulled out my phone and opened the photo album, turning the screen toward her. Does this look professional to you? 2 glasses of champagne? A bed clearly slept in by 2 people? Samantha's eyes widened, tears pooling as she stared at the evidence. Ethan, please. Don't, I snapped, cutting her off. I gave you every chance to be honest. But now, I know the truth, Samantha. And guess what? So does Daniel. She turned to Daniel, her expression pleading. It's not what it looks like. Oh, it's exactly what it looks like, Daniel said, his tone scathing. Ethan deserves better than this garbage. Samantha broke down, sobbing into her hands. I didn't mean for it to happen, she cried. It was a mistake. A mistake? I repeated, my voice shaking with anger. A mistake is spilling coffee on a report, Samantha. Months of sneaking around, lying to my face. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. And then, Amidst her tearful apologies, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen and felt my stomach drop. It was a text from Nathan. Tell Samantha to check her phone. Things just got complicated. The first twist of the knife. This wasn't just betrayal. There was more to this story. A darker, deeper truth waiting to surface. And I was determined to uncover it. The text from Nathan sent a fresh wave of unease through me. Things just got complicated, it read. Complicated? How much worse could this get? I clenched my jaw, ignoring Samantha's tearful pleas as I held up my phone for her to see. What does this mean, Samantha? I demanded, my voice cold and sharp. She glanced at the screen, her sobs halting for a moment. Her face shifted, a flicker of recognition sparking in her eyes before she looked away, unable to meet my gaze. I don't know, she stammered. Bullshit, I snapped, slamming my phone onto the coffee table. The sound made her flinch. Daniel, who had been watching silently from the corner, finally spoke. Sam, you're not doing yourself any favors here, he said, his voice calm but firm. If there's more to this, you might as well come clean now. Samantha's hands fidgeted in her lap, her eyes darting between me and Daniel. It's nothing, she said weakly. Nathan's just being dramatic. Dramatic? I repeated, incredulous. That's the best you've got? I stood abruptly, pacing the room as I tried to piece together the fragments of this mess. My instincts told me there was more to Nathan's cryptic message, something Samantha wasn't telling me. Fine, I said, stopping to face her. You don't want to talk? Then I'll just go straight to Nathan. Let's see what he has to say. Panic flashed across her face, and she stood quickly, reaching for my arm. Ethan, wait, she cried. You don't need to do that. I'll explain. I shook her off, crossing my arms. Then start talking. For a moment, she hesitated, her lips trembling as if she were struggling to form the words. Finally, she exhaled shakily and looked at me with tear-streaked cheeks. Nathan and we've been seeing each other for a few months, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The confirmation, while expected, still hit like a sucker punch. My jaw tightened, but I forced myself to stay silent. But it's over now, she continued hastily. It was a mistake, Ethan, I swear. I ended it weeks ago. Then why the hell is he texting you now? I shot back, my voice dripping with venom. Her face fell, and she looked down, avoiding my eyes. Because he's been threatening to tell you, she admitted. He said if I didn't keep seeing him, he'd ruin everything. The room fell silent, her words hanging heavily in the air. I glanced at Daniel, whose expression mirrored my own disbelief. You're telling me Nathan blackmailed you into continuing the affair? I asked slowly, the pieces starting to click into place. Samantha nodded, sniffling. I didn't know what to do. He's my superior at work. He has so much leverage over me, over my career. I was terrified, Ethan. I thought I could handle it on my own, but you handled it by lying to my face and betraying our marriage. I interrupted, my anger flaring again. Don't act like you were some helpless victim, Samantha. You could have told me. You could have gone to HR hell. You could have quit your job if it was that bad. I didn't want to lose everything, she whispered, her voice breaking. I didn't want to lose you. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Well, congratulations. You lost me anyway. Daniel cleared his throat, drawing both of our attention. Not to pile on, Sam, but this whole sob story about Nathan blackmailing you? That's a hell of a claim. And if it's true, then why didn't you just show Ethan the texts months ago? Samantha's eyes widened slightly, her silence speaking louder than any excuse she could offer. Daniel raised an eyebrow, leaning forward. Yeah, that's what I thought. I turned away, my mind racing. Was she lying about Nathan's blackmail, too? Or was she telling the truth, but only because she was cornered? Either way, it didn't change my next move. You know what? I said finally, my voice calm but icy. I'm done talking. I'm done listening to your excuses. You made your choices, Samantha. Now it's my turn. Her eyes filled with fresh tears, but I didn't care. I grabbed my keys from the counter and headed for the door. Daniel stood as well, clapping a reassuring hand on my shoulder. I've got your back, man, he said quietly. Thanks, I muttered, barely hearing him over the pounding in my ears. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit me like a slap. I climbed into my car and gripped the steering wheel, staring at Nathan's text one more time. Complicated, I murmured to myself. You have no idea what complicated looks like, Nathan. It was time to confront him, not just for answers, but for something far more satisfying. This wasn't about salvaging anything with Samantha anymore. This was about reclaiming my dignity. And if Nathan thought he could walk away unscathed, he was about to learn otherwise. The drive to Nathan's downtown apartment felt like an eternity. My mind churned with fury and anticipation, replaying Samantha's confessions and Nathan's audacious text. Whatever excuses he had prepared, I was ready to dismantle them. I pulled up to his building, a sleek, modern structure that reeked of arrogance. My fists clenched as I walked to the intercom, but before I could buzz up, a familiar voice called out from behind me. Ethan? I turned to see Amanda, one of Samantha's co-workers. She looked hesitant, clutching a takeaway bag and glancing at me with a mix of confusion and concern. What are you doing here? She asked cautiously. I could ask you the same, I replied, my tone sharper than intended. Amanda hesitated, then sighed. Let me guess. You're here because of Nathan? Her words stopped me cold. What do you know about Nathan? She glanced around, lowering her voice. Look, I wasn't going to get involved, but I've seen how he operates. He's trouble, Ethan. More than you realize. I narrowed my eyes. What kind of trouble? Amanda stepped closer, her expression grim. Nathan's a predator. He's done this before. Used his position at work to manipulate women, threaten them, and then discard them when he's done. Your wife isn't the first, and she won't be the last. Her words hit like a sucker punch. I thought I'd prepared for every scenario, but this was worse than I'd imagined. Why hasn't anyone reported him? I demanded. Amanda laughed bitterly. Do you know how hard it is to take someone like Nathan down? He covers his tracks, twists the story to make himself look like the victim. Most women are too scared to fight him, afraid of what he'll do to their careers or their reputations. I clenched my jaw, fury boiling inside me. Not this time, I said. She hesitated, then nodded. Be careful. He's not as untouchable as he thinks, but he's still dangerous. With that, Amanda walked away, leaving me with more questions than answers. But I couldn't stop now. I buzzed Nathan's apartment, and moments later, his voice crackled through the intercom. Who is it? It's Ethan, I said, keeping my tone neutral. A pause. Then, what the hell do you want? We need to talk. Now. The door clicked open, and I made my way up, my heart pounding. When Nathan opened the door, his usual smugness was replaced by unease. He was dressed casually, but his guarded posture suggested he wasn't as confident as he wanted to appear. Make it quick, he said, stepping aside to let me in. I walked into his immaculate apartment, taking a moment to steady myself. You think this is over? I asked, my voice low and steady. You think you can destroy my marriage and walk away unscathed? Nathan smirked, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Look, Ethan, I don't know what Samantha's told you, but... Save it, I interrupted. I know everything. About the affair. About the threats. And thanks to Amanda, I know I'm not the first person you've pulled this crap with. That wiped the smirk off his face. He straightened, his jaw tightening. Amanda doesn't know what she's talking about, doesn't she? I stepped closer, meeting his gaze. You're a coward, Nathan. You prey on people who you think can't fight back. But you made a mistake this time. You underestimated me. Nathan's eyes flickered with something. Fear, maybe, but he quickly masked it with defiance. And what are you going to do, Ethan? Go to HR? File a report? Good luck proving anything. You'll just look like a jealous husband trying to ruin my career. I smiled coldly, pulling out my phone. You're right, I could go that route. But why stop there when I have photos of your little rendezvous with Samantha? Not to mention the texts and testimony from Amanda. Imagine how your clients would react if they found out their golden boy wasn't so squeaky clean after all. Nathan's face turned pale. You wouldn't dare. Try me, I said, my voice dripping with contempt. For a moment, he was silent, his bravado crumbling as he realized he was cornered. Then he laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Fine," he said, throwing up his hands. "What do you want, Ethan? An apology? Closure? Revenge?" "I want you out of her life," I said. "Out of her job, her contacts, everything. You don't get to use her, or anyone else again." Nathan sneered. "And if I refuse?" I leaned in, my voice cold and lethal. "Then I make sure everyone knows exactly who you are. And I won't stop until your name is poison." For the first time, Nathan looked genuinely afraid. He nodded stiffly, his bravado shattered. "Fine. You win." I stepped back, feeling a grim satisfaction as I watched him squirm. As I left his apartment, I felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, relief, and an unshakable resolve. Nathan was finished, but my battle wasn't over yet. Samantha still had to face the consequences of her choices, and the final confrontation would leave no room for doubt about who had truly won. The morning after my confrontation with Nathan, I woke with a strange sense of clarity. The storm of emotions, anger, betrayal, humiliation, had dulled to a cold, focused determination. Samantha would know that her choices had consequences, and this time, there would be no excuses or second chances. First, I called my lawyer. "Let's move forward with the divorce," I said, my voice steady. "I want no delays, and I want to make it crystal clear to Samantha that her actions are to blame." He agreed, promising to expedite the paperwork. With that in motion, I turned my attention to the next phase of my plan, ensuring Samantha faced the truth in a way she couldn't deny. That evening, I waited for her at the house. She arrived just after 6 p.m., her face lighting up with a wary smile when she saw me. "Ethan," she began, stepping inside, "I didn't expect you to be here." I nodded toward the living room. "We need to talk." She hesitated, glancing at my expression before setting down her purse and walking in. She froze when she saw the stack of photos and printed messages on the coffee table. Her face paled as she sat down, her hands trembling. What is this?" "It's everything," I said coldly. "The photos, the texts, the timeline of your affair with Nathan. Proof that you didn't just betray me. You lied, manipulated, and hid behind excuses while you tore apart our marriage." Samantha's eyes brimmed with tears, her voice cracking as she said, "Ethan, I can explain." "Don't," I snapped. "Don't insult me with more lies. You've had every opportunity to tell me the truth, and every time, you chose deceit." She broke into sobs, her shoulders shaking as she buried her face in her hands. But I felt no sympathy, only a grim satisfaction that she was finally facing the weight of her actions. "I've filed for divorce," I said, my tone flat. Her sobs quieted as she looked up at me, her face stricken. "Ethan, no," she whispered. "Please don't do this. I can fix this. I'll do anything." "It's too late, Samantha," I replied. "This isn't about fixing anything. It's about holding you accountable." She reached for my hand, but I stepped back. "You made your choices, and now I'm making mine. I've also spoken to Nathan." Her eyes widened in panic. "What did you do?" "Nothing illegal," I said with a bitter smile. "But let's just say he won't be a problem for you, or anyone else at your office, ever again." He agreed to resign, effective immediately. Her face crumpled, and she slumped back on the couch. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she murmured. "I was scared, confused." "You weren't scared or confused when you laughed with him behind my back," I interrupted. "Or when you planned your lies. You didn't care about how I'd feel, Samantha. You cared about yourself." The words hung in the air, heavy and final. For the first time, Samantha had nothing to say. Over the next few weeks, the divorce proceedings moved swiftly. Samantha didn't contest the terms, likely realizing she was in no position to negotiate. I kept the house, the savings, and most importantly, my self-respect. But my victory didn't end there. Word of Nathan's resignation spread through Samantha's office like wildfire, and whispers about his misconduct began to surface. Amanda, emboldened by my confrontation, went to HR with her own experiences, prompting others to come forward. By the time the dust settled, Nathan's career was in ruins, and Samantha was left to navigate the fallout. I, however, felt lighter with each passing day. For the first time in years, I was free of the weight of her lies and manipulation. 6 months later, I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, a modest but cozy space overlooking the city. The cool breeze carried a sense of renewal, a reminder that life moves forward even after heartbreak. I'd rebuilt myself piece by piece, focusing on what mattered: my passions, my friendships, and my newfound sense of independence. And then there was Claire. We'd met at a coffee shop, her warm smile and easy laughter a stark contrast to the storm I'd weathered with Samantha. She was everything I didn't realize I needed: kind, genuine, and supportive. One evening, as we walked through a nearby park, she turned to me with a curious smile. "You never told me how things ended with your ex." I hesitated, the memories no longer sharp but still vivid. "It's a long story," I said, grinning. "But let's just say I learned a lot about myself and what I deserve." She squeezed my hand. "Well, I'm glad you found your way here." "So am I," I said, meaning every word. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, I realized I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Samantha and Nathan were nothing more than distant memories, their betrayals powerless to hurt me anymore. I'd won, not through vengeance, but through reclaiming my life and my happiness. And that, I knew, was the sweetest victory of all.